Hello and welcome back to this Damnable Idealistic Crusade. This video will be going over the last couple titles I picked up in the Barnes & Noble Criterion sale. The reason why it took a little while to do this video is I actually wound up having to do 2 returns of sorts due to damaged or mispackaged items, which is something I wanted to go over anyway, particularly since one of them was an issue that was actually from the factory and quite an odd one. So I had to wait for some replacement things to get here. I don't normally do this many in the Criterion sale, but I was just trying to pick up on more titles that I hadn't gotten yet and ones that were really nagging at me, especially every time I thought of a particular title and I'm like, oh crap, I haven't gotten the Criterion Blu-ray yet. So I will then be very shortly knee-deep in doing my usual type of comparison nerdiness with all of my prior other copies. But of course, this one I had to get as soon as it was announced, and this spurred me on to get some other titles I was missing. So of course I picked up Spine 1085, the new release of Bringing Up Baby, one of the greatest films ever made, a real treasure, and one of the films that has pulled me out of the depths many a time. A film I have seen an insane number of times, that I've enjoyed on Laserdisc and DVD, and have long awaited a Blu-ray upgrade. So I will, of course, be doing my usual comparisons to the DVD and Laserdisc. I've been lucky enough to see this film on the preserved print from the Museum of Modern Art Film Archive, which is actually the print they used for the Laserdisc and primary source for the DVD as well. So apparently they used a newly discovered British source to mix in with that source as well. So this restoration should prove to be a welcome improvement over even what we had on the DVD, which was unfortunately limited due to the source materials available. There is this really nicely done booklet. Of course, they've carried the leopard motif, so I guess Baby got lost and found his way into the actual booklet itself. But the essays are as usual well done. But it's actually a bit more substantial than a lot of more recent Criterion booklets, from what I've been noticing. It does carry over the Peter Bogdanovich commentary from the DVD, which I know is hit or miss with most people. I've listened to it a number of times. I kind of like his more laid-back conversational style. It's pretty much just him coming from it as a fan, with his background of interviewing Howard Hawks many times, and of course being one of the great Hollywood anecdote storytellers that we still have. But outside of that, in terms of the extras, there's a new piece on Russell Meddy, the great cinematographer. Then Craig Barron talks about Linwood Dunn, the special effects pioneer, who was very key in making all of the scenes with Baby come across. Although some, you can tell, there are moments where you're like, that really doesn't look like a special effect. That looks quite dangerous, actually, which just helps add to the film's madcap atmosphere. There are pieces on the costume designer. There is an audio interview with Cary Grant from 1969. There is a substantial documentary about Hawks from 1977, so very late in his life. Also, you get excerpts from the, as I mentioned before, the Peter Bogdanovich interviews with Howard Hawks, which are rather candid. I've heard excerpts of them before in other places, although Hawks was much more willing to talk, shall we say, than John Ford was when Bogdanovich would interview him. There's also, of course, a new piece on Cary Grant by Scott Eyman, who just published a really great biography on Grant, probably the best one there is to date. But for me, the best part of the extras package is, again, going back to this booklet, which, of course, is loaded with great stills from the film. But the reason why it's kind of heftier is it actually republishes the original short story that was the basis for the actual film. Let's see if I can get to the actual title page of it. But you see here on page 14, you're actually going to get the original short story, which was the basis for the film. And that's why, again, the booklet is quite a bit heftier than usual. And once again, to just go over this really quickly, the Criterion has a well-oiled machine for their packaging design. So usually the interior art underneath the disc tray has something cute or a great image from the film, as a nice background. So of course here, to keep the leopard spot motif and the tail motif that makes its way onto the disc, The actual background is leopard print. So of course, you open the case and you almost think it should start as if it had one of those little musical chips with a speaker in it. Like you should open the case and it starts singing, "I can't give you anything but love." But hey, one can dream, right? So I'm really excited to dig into this, and I just can't wait to look for my intercostal clavicle in this new 4K restored transfer. So since I picked up Bringing Up Baby, it made me really just once again bemoan the fact that I hadn't picked up the other great screwball comedies featuring and starring Cary Grant that Criterion has released on Blu-ray. There are so many titles I am behind on that every year the sale rolls around and I just think of about a million. And so I usually chip away at one or two. Otherwise, I would just go insane and blow every last cent in my wallet every sale. This one, I went a bit more than usual, but these were some I've just been meaning to get for ages. So, of course, that meant I would go ahead and get the other three primary screwball comedies that Criterion has released starring Cary Grant. So, of course, that meant grabbing a copy of Spine number 917, which is 1937's The Awful Truth, directed by Leo McCarey, starring Cary Grant and Irene Dunne. It is one of the great screwball comedies ever. It is a masterpiece. If you haven't seen this film or any of these films, stop what you're doing. It's that level of magic. But really, this is the film that birthed the Cary Grant that we know in terms of the Cary Grant persona. There were elements that were already there in earlier films. You see it coming through. For example, you can see flashes of it in She Done Him Wrong, which is the Mae West film that he made. You see a lot more in the George Cukor directed Sylvia Scarlett from 1935, which also pairs him with Katharine Hepburn, which is bizarre sort of screwball comedy. It has its fans, it has its detractors, it is a bit of an acquired taste, but over the course of the 1930s, you can see the Cary Grant persona start to come out in various elements, but it wasn't quite there. And then you have him united with Leo McCarey on The Awful Truth, sparking off perfectly with Irene Dunne. They make a fantastic on-screen pairing. But this is where the Cary Grant that we all know and love really comes to form, with the physical comedy, the urbane wit, the ability to poke fun at himself and to look ridiculous without being ridiculous. All the bits of the sardonic wit and everything is first fully polished here. So this film is even all the more special because of that. This is a beautiful package from Criterion. This is just another one of the Blu-ray titles of theirs that I've just been kicking myself I hadn't gotten yet. This is a film I return to frequently, and I have pretty much worn out my copy of the Cary Grant DVD box set that Columbia, or I should say Sony, did. And of course, these are Sony held titles, so they were primarily in charge of the restorations. I believe this one is also sourced from a 4K restoration with restored mono as well. So Molly Haskell, the great film critic and historian, does the essay. What I really love about the booklet is when you open it, on both sides you have Grant and Dunne sort of split by the spine. It's a wonderful touch, and I love the black and white on the gold. It's a beautiful art design. Of course, again, this was primarily a 4K restoration handled by Sony. They wound up using a duplicate fine grain negative because the OCN, or the original camera negative, is lost, and it was patched in with bits of some fine grain materials. I have already spot checked this, and of course, it just wipes the floor with the old DVD, which had a lot of damage and things. In terms of the extras, again, it is a brand new 4K restoration. It does have a new piece from Gary Giddens about the director Leo McCarey, who is supremely important and hardly ever mentioned these days. The critic David Cairns gives a particular video essay specifically about Grant's performance. If you're a Cary Grant fan, if you've never seen The Awful Truth, you're really doing yourself a disservice. Again, this is really his career milestone in terms of reestablishing himself and really as a star, A-list lead actor for the first time. But of course, this really cast him in the comedic mold, and it would really take another 2 years until the sort of 1-2 punch of Gunga Din, and especially Howard Hawks' directed Only Angels Have Wings. Those were the two films that really broke him in the dramatic mold. So then he was able to, for the rest of his career, sort of jump back and forth between the more comedic roles and the more dramatic roles with ease, because he had been tried and true and proven as an A-list star in both categories of films. There's also a 1978 audio interview with Irene Dunne, which is always fascinating when you're able to hear from classic era stars and crew members in their much later years. There's also the Lux Radio Theater adaptation of the film that was performed by Cary Grant and Claudette Colbert performing the Irene Dunne role. And again, the Molly Haskell essay in the booklet. So just another one of the really fantastic 4K restorations that Criterion has released on Blu-ray. An essential film, just one of the many Blu-rays I hadn't gotten around to picking up yet. Next up is another beloved screwball comedy classic, another masterpiece of the genre and of cinema in general. That, of course, is Spine Number 901, the 4K restored The Philadelphia Story, directed by George Cukor, another of the unheralded great directors who is not mentioned pretty much at all today outside of critical circles, which is doing his work a criminal disservice. This is a extraordinarily beloved title for great reasons, and of course brings together the great trinity of classic stars in Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart, who of course won his Best Actor Oscar for this film. This is one of those classic screwball comedy films that even if you haven't seen it, when you finally do see it, you recognize so many echoes of all the films and stories that have ripped it off or been inspired by it many times since. And of course, the film was remade as a musical, as the film High Society, much later in the 1950s. So this is actually pretty nice art, and of course sticking with the black and white theme, but I like how if you look, it's set around the swimming pool sequence, but Katharine Hepburn is Tracy here, the way that she's positioned on the sort of diving board, it makes her look like she's on a pedestal, and always makes me think of all the times in the film where Tracy Lord, her character, is referred to as being sort of the goddess or in the ivory tower, or so strong of a character that she is literally, lording it above everyone else. And the film is basically about sort of, the whole story is about sort of puncturing that and giving her character a massive arc and everyone in her orbit. So, of course, it was originally done for the stage. It was a vehicle designed for Katharine Hepburn, and she very smartly seized the film rights and basically took charge and wound up in the process essentially restarting and jump-starting her film career all over again, because after box office failures like Bringing Up Baby, a whole string of them, she had been labeled, the term is box office poison, which is, of course, ridiculous and overstating it, but that mentality had been stuck in people's minds. So it is really, Katharine Hepburn who was the driving force in getting this film off the ground and getting this cast together. And of course, it was produced at MGM with more lavish production values than, say, had it been made at Columbia, like The Awful Truth. Of course, here's the interior, keeping this lovely design. And then the interior art is from that same aforementioned pool scene. Here's the wonderful booklet. Now, of course, the transfer was from a brand new 4K restoration. They did have to scan and utilize a 35mm fine grain positive because, unfortunately, the original negative was apparently lost in a fire in the 1970s. So, of course, that means this is not going to be as pristine as something that was from an original negative, but it's definitely the best we've ever seen in the film. And I will, of course, be doing my usual comparisons to, I have the special edition DVD, of course, and the later release, or I should say the second release Laserdisc. And of course, I've seen this film insane amount of times and will keep enjoying it. So now I have the lovely Criterion version with a pretty nice extras package. So it carries over the Janine Basinger commentary from the 2005 DVD. There's a whole new documentary on the disc about the Tracy Lord character and her rather interesting status as a very strong female character in the course of the film and how that fits the societal context of 1940 and comparing it to other films and other female roles around the time period. And there's another documentary about Katharine Hepburn and her getting the film rights and basically developing the film and getting it off the ground. Then there are two full episodes of the Dick Cavett Show with Katharine Hepburn on there. And if you've ever seen old Dick Cavett episodes, they're just so fascinating. And some have been uploaded online or on YouTube, and I find myself falling in a hole, and I watch like 4 or 5 or 6 episodes before I know it, because he had such a knack for getting people to just be extremely candid, and they're just absolutely just riveting. And also George Cukor pops in on one of those. That's included on here, and that's just a real treasure seeing the two of them, and in that sort of scenario, just being extremely candid. Then you also get the 1943 Lux Radio Theater adaptation, which, of course, was hosted and presented by Cecil B. DeMille. Then you get a demonstration of the restoration itself, plus the film's trailer, in addition to the booklet essay. So this is another essential masterpiece of the cinema that should be in everyone's collection, or you should at least see 5, 10, 15, 20 times or more. It is a timeless gem, one of the great screwball comedies, and a film I still adore. I wind up quoting all the time. Particularly, I don't know why it's always stuck in my head, but I always wind up trying to do a terrible impression of when Jimmy's character gets totally wasted on champagne and is going around like, champagne is the great leveler. And of course, it's a scene where Stewart is sharing the screen with Cary Grant, and pretty much my two favorite actors of all time sharing the screen is just like, oh, why did this not happen more? But it's an absolutely magical film, a magical experience to return to every single time, and just another one of the great Criterion Blu-rays I had just been meaning to get and kicking myself that I hadn't gotten yet. Next, we come to another one of the great films of all time, one of the great screwball comedies starring Cary Grant. But this is one of the ones I had to wind up doing a return, and this one had the very bizarre factory packaging issue. So, of course, I finally picked up Spine number 849, which is the Howard Hawks directed masterpiece His Girl Friday from 1940, the remake of The Front Page, and of course turning the character of Hildy into a female and being a former lover of Walter Burns, which puts a whole different spin on the story. But what's amazing about this is it includes the original 1931 film adaptation of The Front Page, so it's a double feature release, which is why it's a little bit higher price point than the standard Criterion releases, and it is a 2-disc affair. But what I had a problem was I had to order this online from BarnesandNoble.com. When I got it, I noticed there was a floater disc because I could hear a disc floating around. But when I opened it, it was quite bizarre that this is what happened. So as you see, this is actually a single disc Scanovo case. So the disc itself is just literally sitting on top of the other one. So I was totally perplexed as to why this was. I guess it just must have been an error, or somebody ran out of 2-disc Scanovo cases. So I didn't know exactly how to go about it because everything is still perfectly fine. So I decided to write into Criterion just to see if I could get a replacement case, simply because I know you can purchase like multiple additional ones, but I just needed the one. I needed a correct case. And I didn't want to go through returning because I was already doing something else that had gotten damaged in shipping from Barnes & Noble, which really doesn't happen all that often. So it just was kind of interesting that I had 2 of these that I had to do some return stuff on. But I just needed a new case. Everything else was fine. So I just sent them an email, and thinking it would probably take a while to get a response, that I'd probably have to purchase one or pay for shipping or something. And I have to give it to Criterion. They actually got in touch with me really quickly, and they were extremely nice about it. And they actually sent me a replacement case and didn't charge me shipping or anything. So I was really pleasantly surprised. And they said it might take a while, and that's perfectly understandable. It's not a earth-shattering issue, a collector getting the wrong disc case, But I was amazed that they actually did it very, very quickly. And so just the other day, this arrived in the mail. So a fresh 2-disc Scanovo case, fresh from Criterion. That was extremely quick. So I was just so pleased. Again, very, very blown away with the customer support response time, because I'm used to having to contact like a major studio, like trying to contact somebody at Warner Brothers, particularly now since it seems the person in charge of that department is no longer with the company. So you have to wait months to hopefully get a response. So this was fantastic. So I will slip this into this correct case to show you how it's actually supposed to look. So here it is in its correct 2-disc Scanovo case. So again, everything is the same, but you open it up, the discs themselves are actually housed as they should be. And they carry the same type of design. And then disc 2 has the other extras plus the 1931 front page, which is a great film in its own right. But honestly, I saw His Girl Friday first, and it's such a one of the life-changing masterpiece films that it's really impossible for me to even think about the front page story without thinking of it as Walter and Hildy and the extra romantic sparks that fly throughout the film. Of course, here is the interior art. Of course, the front page was also restored from newly discovered sources. I believe there's also another specific Blu-ray restoration out for the front page. I want to say it's available from Kino or Cohen, but I can't remember who put it out, but I know there's a competing version as well, in addition to this secondary version that's in the Criterion package. The booklet is very cheekily done in a newspaper style. So, of course, it's a fold out and, of course, has the murder story that's within the film. So this is actually done in a headline grabbing style. And then the essay is printed throughout as if it was, an actual newspaper you're reading. Trying to do all this on camera is, of course, very difficult. There's even a secondary page that comes out, a whole secondary section, I should say. So this is one of the more elaborate Criterion-style booklets, which is not exactly an actual booklet. And, of course, the newsprint style makes me think of the booklet they did for Billy Wilder's masterpiece, Ace in the Hole. And, of course, it's proper to reference Billy Wilder talking about His Girl Friday because, of course, Wilder himself would make a remake version of the front page with both Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. So, of course, the front page has been done many, many times and been referenced many times. So, but to me, His Girl Friday is the definitive version. It also helps that it stars Rosalind Russell alongside Cary Grant in one of the fastest talking films ever made, which is a pretty well-known fact, I think, nowadays. But it's still amazing to see how ridiculously fast and quick-paced that the film is, and something that Howard Hawks helped to really spur on, and the actors were up to the challenge. And, of course, seeing this film as a young child, seeing just from the opening when Rosalind Russell is Hildy just struts through the newspaper office as one of the guys to, basically hand in her resignation, her final note of resignation to Walter Burns, the Cary Grant character. I think my jaw hit the floor so fast, and it started my lifelong crush on Rosalind Russell that is still going on, as I still adore many of the classic Hollywood actresses. But this film in particular has just fantastic sparks that fly. It's taking a classic story and putting a new twist on it, but with just a remarkable energy to it. There is no other film quite like this, even amongst screwball comedies. It is one of the true masterwork gems that is truly immortal. If you've never seen this film, I cannot recommend it highly enough. The extras package on here is really nice because you have the new 4K restoration of His Girl Friday completed by Sony. Then you have, of course, the newly restored 1931 Lewis Milestone directed version of the front page. David Bordwell, the renowned scholar, does a piece on His Girl Friday. Then there's some archival interviews with Howard Hawks. There's featurettes, I believe, from the old Sony DVDs from 99 and 2006 about Hawks and Rosalind Russell and His Girl Friday. You get the radio adaptation of the film from 1940. Then there's a piece on the restoration of the 1931 front page. Then there's a new bit about the legendary Ben Hecht, one of the great screenwriters of all time, one of the great American writing minds, really, because, of course, he originally came from writing for the stage, where he wrote the original front page play before eventually coming to Hollywood. But he is, without a doubt, one of the greatest, if not the single greatest screenwriting mind who ever lived. He is, without a doubt, one of the great legends of the cinematic medium. Plus, you get extra radio adaptations of the front page play from 1937 and 1946. You get trailers for the film, and again, the booklets. So, just a beautiful package that I can't wait to dive into, and of course, compare it to my Laserdisc edition and my DVD edition, because, of course, why not have multiple copies of some of the great films of all time? This means that Criterion has done 4 of the 5 films in the still pretty excellent Columbia Cary Grant box set from, I believe it's from 2006. Yeah, 2006. And of course, this has been well watched by me. It's still a really nice box set with a nice fold out design. But the what I really hope for is that we get the final film in this set on Blu-ray, which is another masterpiece, which is, of course, the George Stevens directed classic, The Talk of the Town. So that would be great if Criterion could tackle that. So finally, we have all the major Grant titles that were in this DVD box set. So now I'm able to jump to Blu-ray for everything but Talk of the Town, which is another masterpiece that just does not get referenced enough. So if you've never seen this film, I do highly recommend it. If you've watched these others and you've adored them as I do, this is your next logical step. Next up is another title I've been meaning to get ever since it came out, and I have the actually the pretty hard to get Laserdisc box set with the multiple versions and a lot of great exclusive extras. But I had to get the 4K restoration of the 1936 James Whale directed masterpiece of Showboat, the classic stage musical. This being the 1936 film version. There had been the previous 1920s version. There would be the 1950s remake with Ava Gardner. But this is the one. This is the one that stands the test of time. It's also the last gasp of the classic Universal of the actual Laemmle family. This was their last big huzzah. This big budget, extravagant production of Showboat, where James Whale got to basically do his usual thing and take charge of absolutely every aspect of the production. And it was actually on the making of this film that the Laemmles wound up basically betting the studio to get the amount of money to make this film. And while it did become a smash hit, unfortunately, the people they made the deal with decided to cash in and take over the studio. So this is really the last film of the original Universal in terms of the studio identity. And of course, after this point, James Whale never had that same type of artistic support as he did from both Carl Laemmle Sr. and Jr., who were essentially his artistic patrons, as it were. So for James Whale fans, this is really the last truly great, untouched, Whale-directed masterpiece that we would ever get. So it's important for a lot of reasons. Of course, I'm not really a musicals person, but this is something else entirely. And of course, I am a James Whale fanatic, as everyone should be, because if anyone ever defined the term auteur, it was James Whale. There was not one aspect of any film production he was ever involved in that he did not have creative control over or have an opinion. So this is a really lovely package, really nice art design, very simple, but very well done in black and white to match the film. The wonderful essays. This is a really important film. It's very historically significant, and of course, it should be examined today for its importance originally as a stage musical and then a film adaptation. And there are also really great pieces on here that examine both the historical and racial context of the film story, the production, its release. This is really an incredible film to see. Even if you're like me and you're not into musicals, it is just in a lot of ways it's a last gasp of artistic freedom for James Whale, for the original Laemmle held Universal before it became the new Universal after the studio was taken over. So it's really it's the last film in a number of different ways, but it is just an incredible film. But I'm so happy that we now have this new 4K transfer, again loaded with extras. So there's an audio commentary. James Curtis, who is Wales biographer who wrote the essential Gods and Monsters. That is one of the great film biographies. He has a video interview piece on here about Wales' career at the time and the making of Showboat. Then there's the Recognizing Race in Showboat, where it's all about the racial content of the source material and story. Then there's a piece on the great Paul Robeson, who is, of course, one of the leading stars of the film. Then there are pieces from the prologue and sound portions of the 1929 version of Showboat, which is the previous version. Some of this stuff was on the really fantastic Laserdisc box set that MGM put together in the mid-1990s, which included the 1950s version, the 1936 version, and pieces of the 1929 version, along with many supplementals, and especially in the audio portion. It is a really packed Laserdisc box set. Unfortunately, not all 100% of that material makes it onto this Criterion release, so if you're a fan of Showboat or you want to have absolutely every last scrap of extras material, you will have to have that Laserdisc box set as well. So in addition to the sound portions from the 1929 version of Showboat, you also get certain sections of the rest of the film with optional commentary. So there are also, and then it's rounded out by 2 radio adaptations. So this is a fantastic package. This is really an underrated film, something that myself and many other whale fans and fans of musicals and different things have wanted to come to Blu-ray for a long time. Warner Archive was only able to do a DVD version a number of years ago, which basically was the Laserdisc master from that box set. So I know it's probably going to be a bit of a hard sell in terms of material and being in black and white. It's going to be a hard sell for a lot of people, but it is so beautifully made, and it's an artistic triumph in a number of ways, translating a musical from the stage to film in the 1930s. And again, it's really the last gasp for James Whale's great creative freedom at the original Laemmle held Universal. So it's really important for a number of reasons, and I'm just so happy we now finally have this beautiful package from Criterion on Blu-ray. So of course, I'm always tempted by the new releases, as we all are, so that meant I had to go ahead and grab spine number 1078, which is, of course, the 1947 noir classic Nightmare Alley, starring Tyrone Power. This film has been long out of print on DVD, which I was never able to get, so this was a very welcome announcement that Criterion was going to be releasing a new restored transfer of the film. I really like the art design. I think it's of course, high concept and sort of arty like Criterion usually does, but of course the circus setting of the film lends itself perfectly to this. I absolutely love this art. It would have been cool to keep the poster art, which has one of the great iconic noir posters. The rendering of Tyrone Power on that poster is just one of the great pieces of film art. But I really like what Criterion did with this. Of course, when you pick this up, you might think it has a floater inside, as I did, but what was not announced but is in this package is Criterion actually did a little bit of extra trinket swag, if you will. So included are these wonderful 6 tarot cards of the various characters represented, with this lovely all-seeing eye on the background. So this is just, I'm not used to Criterion doing little bits of swag like this. It's, of course, totally unnecessary, and I think, unfortunately, some people's copies didn't include these, but I love it when somebody goes the extra mile and really does something different. So it's, again, not advertised, but I really love these. And of course, the booklet carries the same stylization, and it's a fold-out in terms of where the essay is, so you get more images. But it is a quite long fold-out, so this makes me flash back to the old days of Criterion DVD booklets, where they would very commonly do a fold-out booklet like this. But thankfully, what I do, because it's hard to tuck away the card somewhere, I keep them in the center of the booklet, which fits very nicely. So that way you're able to keep them from sliding around. Because when you first get this, it seems like the cards are actually a floater disc and they're just sort of floating around loose inside. So in terms of extras, it again is a new 4K transfer. Unfortunately, they didn't have pristine elements to work from. So again, it's not going to look like something directly from original camera negative. But it does carry over the commentary from the DVD that was done by the great James Orsini and Alain Silver. Imogen Sarah Smith does a wonderful video essay interview. Then there's a piece from performer and historian Todd Robbins. There's an interview from 2007 with Colleen Gray. There's a 1971 interview excerpt with Henry King where he talks about the film and Tyrone Power. Of course, it's just fantastic when you get anything from people who were literally there. So you're getting firsthand source material. So Kim Morgan does the booklet essay, and it also includes the film's trailer. So a really handsome upgrade over the out-of-print DVD, which I was never able to get. So this was such a welcome surprise announcement, and hearing about the tarot cards just really swung me over the fence. And so I was like, I got to go ahead and get this because I've been wanting to, I've tried to get the DVD before, but I've just never owned this film before. And it is one of the great classic noir vehicles, and with a different sort of setting than what you're used to with the circus background. And it is Tyrone Power trying to break out of his traditional star leading man mold. He was really fighting that by the end of the 1940s, which he felt very trapped in his Fox contract. So this is just another essential 40s classic noir, essential for Tyrone Power fans. If you've never seen this and you're a noir junkie, this is a must. So of course I had to pick it up in the Barnes & Noble Criterion sale. Lastly, I picked up a final title that I had meant to get for ages. It is one of the special ones that includes a book with it as well. I always try to get one of the Criterion releases during the sale that's a bit pricier, or it's a double disc set or multi-feature, or one of the ones that has a book with it. This is one I just meant to get for ages, and of course when I decided to get it, my local stores are completely out of stock, so I had to order this online. Unfortunately, when I did get my copy, it had gotten really damaged in shipping. The box was beat up. It was crumpled in corners. I was going to try and live with that, but when I opened it, I found the actual disc hub inside the case was totally broken, and the discs were just flopping around, and had unfortunately gotten scratched up. So I was able to contact Barnes & Noble, and once they got new copies in stock, I was able to get a replacement. So that's why this video was a little bit delayed, but I did finally go ahead and pick up Spine number 709, which is the landmark Western, one of the great films of the genre. Red River, directed by Howard Hawks. This is the deluxe package from Criterion that includes the theatrical release version and the slightly different pre-release version. So much like Howard Hawks' directed The Big Sleep from 1946, where we have the ability to watch the 1945 pre-release version, we now have the chance to do the same with the iconic Red River, which, again, it's such a landmark Western that it's one of the 5 or 10 great Westerns of all time, one of the genre classics. If you've never seen this film and you like Westerns at all, this is an absolute must. It is so hugely influential that it's been ripped off and borrowed from innumerable times. This is a beautiful package because, of course, it is one of Criterion's releases where they actually include the original novel, much like their recent release of the Anthony Mann picture, The Furies, from 1950. So this includes Blazing Guns on the Chisholm Trail, the original Board and Chase novel, done to match the new design. I love this layout design. Of course, this was originally released as a dual format with the DVD as well, but this is the slimmed down version where they thankfully kept the book, and it is just presented on 2 Blu-rays. Now, because of the way this is designed, that's why it's very difficult to get these shipped or in store without a bunch of damage. So do be careful if you're looking to get any releases like this. It's also something you have to watch out for when you actually remove these in and out of the case, because this type of digipack design is very easy to nick and crumple the corners. And the booklet is actually tucked in here, so that will come loose if you're not careful. So, of course, actual digibook is matching pictures of both John Wayne and Monty Clift. And then the discs inside are packaged like this. So my original copy I gotten, you can see why not having the plastic hub just meant that the discs were flopping around. It had gotten really scuffed up. So thankfully this was my nice replacement copy. But as you can see already, there is a little bit of corner crumpling. I don't know how clear this is, but that's just going to, it's pretty much commonplace on any of this type of packaging by the time that it makes it to you, either in a store or once you've ordered it online. Then the booklet is lovingly done. So the only sort of red that you have in the interior is on the actual booklet itself, which I thought was nice. And it carries over the sort of dusky sepia tone black and white imagery for the lovely essay pieces. What's really amazing about this is the second piece in the booklet is actually a reprinting of a interview with the editor, Christian Nyby. If I'm pronouncing it correctly, I hope I am. Of course, he would edit several films for Hawks, and of course he's able to go into some detail about the cutting process, because looking at the two versions of Red River is really interesting. Hawks actually did prefer the theatrical release version, which he's probably right. It's been a while since I've looked at the pre-release version and the online comparisons, so on and so forth, because, primarily for all these years, all we had was the theatrical version, which is what we're used to. Both were restored at 2K resolution, so this is not a 4K transfer. So Criterion had to do a lot of work in actually recomposing the theatrical cut version. They were able to scan the pre-release version at 2K, and then had to use a variety of sources and match in to recreate the theatrical version. So it was quite a bit of work involved. So both were eventually carried out at 2K. So it's really interesting that we have another Howard Hawks picture that, like The Big Sleep, we have two versions to compare. Each version has its own fans, and you can see the positives of each. The pre-release version runs about 6 minutes longer. I believe it's 127 minutes for the theatrical and 133 for the pre-release version. So much like The Big Sleep, where the two versions have slightly different running times. So the Criterion did assemble a really nice extras package to just go over that very quickly. So again, you have the 2K restorations of both the pre-release version and the more commonly known theatrical version from 1948. So there's a new interview with Peter Bogdanovich about Red River and Howard Hawks and the two different versions. Molly Haskell has a piece on Howard Hawks and Red River. Then there's a piece with scholar Lee Clark Mitchell about the Western genre. Another excerpt from conversations between Howard Hawks and Peter Bogdanovich, which are always fascinating to hear. What's really interesting is there are excerpts from a 1970 interview with Borden Chase, who is one of the great Western writers and Western screenwriters who wound up writing for many different films, many different Western classics, and some of my absolutely beloved of the Anthony Mann, James Stewart 5 Western collaboration of the 1950s and the psychological Western. And then you get the Lux Radio Theater adaptation of the film from 1949, and of course the trailers. So the other giant extra being the fact that Borden Chase's original novel is reprinted here. So this is without a doubt one of the best Blu-ray packages Criterion has ever released of one of the great important American films and one of the great films of the Western genre. I can't talk about this film highly enough. It's right there in the pantheon with Winchester 73, The Searchers, all the John Ford classics, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Leone, Peckinpah, and the revisionist westerns that were to come. But this is one of the building blocks of the great Western genre films. Like, this is in the pantheon of the great Westerns. Absolutely loaded package from Criterion, including the rare pre-release version, so you get to do the fun of comparing the two, and nicely split up into a 2-disc set affair. So really great that they did retain the original novel and made this nice slimmed down Blu-ray only package, because again, the original is much thicker because it includes the 2 DVDs. So that does it for this particular video. Again, sorry it took a little while longer, but I did have to do those two contact emails and things. So thankfully, I was able to get a replacement case almost lightning fast from Criterion. They were really wonderful and actually just sending me a case for free very quickly. So many thanks to their customer service department. And of course, Barnes & Noble for sending me a replacement for Red River. So now I have to ship back my damaged other ones. So that definitely means be careful when you're trying to get the multi-disc sets or the special package sets with books, or of course the box sets, which are always better to get in store when you can actually examine the copies. But I really wanted to get Red River in particular because it's one of the ones I always wind up putting back during the sales, and I got a few more than I normally do this year because I'm trying to catch up. So I just really wanted to go ahead and get that because I wanted to look at the pre-release version again and some of the various extras and things. So that does it for this particular video. As always, leave your comments below with some of the titles you picked up or other Criterion stuff you're interested in, and look forward to the next sale, which hopefully, if they follow the usual sort of Barnes & Noble sales schedule, there's usually a second one in November sometime. There's usually two every year. So hopefully we can all have our usual November Criterion fun at Barnes & Noble, picking up some of the newer spine release titles and other things. So until then, thank you ever so much for watching, and keep physical media alive, keep your discs spinning.